Without further ado, I'll go ahead and introduce our speaker today. Hi, Lynda.
Hi.
We're so pleased to have Lynda here with us today, and I'm happy to introduce her as our fall kickoff speaker. Her role as the leader of the Marin County Elections Department makes her the perfect person to speak to us as we count down to November 3rd election. Her calm confidence and professional attitude always impress me and put me at ease, especially during this very unique time to be holding an election. Lynda Roberts was appointed as Marin County Registrar of Voters in 2014. Prior to this appointment, she was the clerk recorder. It's a really long title, Lynda. Clerk recorder, Registrar of Voters, clerk of the Board of Supervisors in Mono County for 7 years. She also lived on the Big Island of Hawaii from 2005 to 2007 and worked in the development department at Parker School, a private K-12 college prep school. Her career in public service and elections started with the Salt Lake City municipal government in 1977. Lynda has lived in a large variety of communities, and we're lucky to have her in Marin County now. Lynda holds a Master's of Public Administration. She worked 14 years at the University of Utah, her alma mater, in political science department as a production manager of an international academic journal and department administrative assistant. Lynda graduated from the San Rafael Leadership Institute and Marin County Leadership Academy and is a member of the California Association of Clerks and Election Officials. We are so grateful that Lynda agreed to take some time out of her very busy pre-election schedule and her weekend to be with us today to help us understand the changes in the upcoming election caused by COVID-19 and how we can partner with her to share information with voters. Please join me in welcoming Lynda Roberts.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, and thank you for this opportunity. So I think, first of all, it's nice to see faces without masks. So I'm happy to see you. And so why don't we go to the next slide? And I just need to say that some of this may sound familiar if people were also attending the Marin Forum meeting recently, where I also gave this presentation. So I think I'll maybe present some different things from that presentation, but some of it might sound familiar. So first of all, I like to put this quote out there for people to consider. Election management is a legally intensive and unusually complex set of time-bound, interconnecting processes that must sequence almost perfectly for the election to be conducted successfully. That is really a precise way of saying that there are a lot of moving parts and deadlines when it comes to administering an election. And COVID has added another layer of complexity, that is for sure. So this election won't be business as usual, but we are working hard to prepare for the climate we're working in. So before we get into the meat of the presentation, I just wanted to give you a snapshot of where we are with registration. So as you see the first number, the 181,150, that is a number that the Secretary of State's office, through a formula they have, has determined the eligible number of people who are registered to vote. And as you can see, the number as of September, and this number of registered voters in Marin County as of September, that was a couple of weeks ago. So it's gone up a little bit from there, but you can see we have a very high rate of voter registration at this point. And it is record high because I know when I started, the number in between major elections would drop down to around 150,000, then it would bounce back up to around 155,000. But since 2016, the registration has stayed really high. So that's a good thing. A lot of people are participating. The other thing that has been increasing over the last few years is the number of permanent vote by mail voters. So as you see, as of September, nearly 84%, and that number's probably gone up as well. Nearly 84% of our registered voters are already permanent vote by mail. So the things I'm going to touch on today won't really impact most of our voters all that much, but it's going to be good information for everybody. So let's go to the next slide. And those are the three main areas that I plan to talk about: vote by mail, polling places, education, and outreach. So next slide there we go. So Assembly Bill 860 was passed, which specified that all active registered voters will receive a ballot in the mail. And that's one of the biggest changes for this election. And so, as I mentioned just a moment ago, that there won't be a big change for people who are already used to voting by mail. But I did want to give a quick review about how some key points to voting by mail that just keep things moving along and moving your ballot through the process quickly so that we can get it counted, which is our goal, absolutely, to get the ballots counted as soon as we can. So the vote by mail ballot packets will start to be mailed on October 5th. They are first class mail. So they should arrive within 5 to 7 days of being mailed. The packet includes a postage paid return envelope, and we really encourage voters whenever we can to make sure they sign that envelope, because if a voter doesn't sign, it just delays processing. We of course send a letter to let them know they didn't sign and they have the opportunity to fix that, but it just delays processing their vote. And so when we get those ballot envelopes, the signature is compared to the voter registration card that is on file. If there's any mismatched signature, then a voter also gets a letter. They have the opportunity to fix that so that we can count their ballot. Another important thing is to be sure to date the envelope, because as we know, the envelope has to be postmarked on or before Election Day. And if it isn't, then that date becomes really important. And if people can send their ballots in maybe a little bit earlier than they normally would, then if it comes in and the postmark isn't there or it's illegible, if we get ballots with that situation before Election Day, then there's no issue because they came in before Election Day. It's after, when we get them in that period after, that we then have to really be sure of the postmark. So there are other ways this election, another big change because of legislation, is we will have more drop boxes throughout the county. And we just posted a list on our website yesterday. So if you go there to www.marinvotes.org and you click, there's a red, white, and blue box, and there's a link that says polling places and drop boxes. Then you can see the list of drop boxes. And so if voters prefer not to use the mail, we will have these drop boxes, and the drop boxes will be available starting October 6th. And as in past elections, voters can also drop ballots off at a polling place. Excuse me, and I will talk about polling places in just a minute. So a new change as well is the number of days we're allowed to accept ballots after the election. So they still have to be postmarked on or before Election Day. However, we will be able to receive ballots that come through the mail up until November 20th. The current law is 3 days after the election, but because of COVID and everybody's going to be getting a ballot this time in the mail, that period has now been extended, which is a good thing, because if people need to wait and send it closer to the election, then there's not the risk of it arriving late. So that is going to be helpful. And lastly, I just wanted, on this slide, I want to touch on the tracking service that we have. so that people can follow their ballot. They'll be notified from when that ballot is put in the mail through the process of having it be counted. So you can go, you can see the website where you can sign up, and I really encourage people to do that. I was signed up for March, and it's really a nice service. It tells you your ballot's been sent, and then when you get it back in the mail, or if you put it in a Dropbox, once it's entered into our election management system, you'll also get notified that your ballot was received, and then when we count it, that it was counted. So it is really a good service. It's easy to sign up for. Of course, it's free, and you can sign up now so you're all prepared. And I think they're going to start turning the messages on, because ballots go out on October 5th. I think the messages are going to be turned on by the end of this month. So I encourage everybody to do that. So next slide, please. So I wanted to go through this outline of how life cycle of a ballot. I'm going to focus on the vote by mail side because we're sending everybody a vote by mail ballot. I really want people to understand how that works. So, and I want to say about vote by mail, because we have such a high rate of people who already vote by mail, that shows us that voter confidence is high in this process. So as you can see, a vote by mail ballot, once it's issued to a voter, and the election management system tracks the ballot. So once a ballot is issued to a voter, we can go in our system and we can see that voter was issued a ballot. And then when it's returned, whether it's by mail, a drop box, or dropped off at the polls, once it goes back through the sorting process, which enters the ballot that we've received it back into election management system, we can see that a ballot was returned for that voter. And then after it goes through the initial sorting process, then we start the signature verification process. So I want to touch on that for just a minute, signature verification. So some of you may, if you've been to the department and we've taken you downstairs into our logistics room, you have seen our sorter. And that sorter, when a ballot runs through the sorter scans the signature and compares it to the voter registration form on file. And if it's a close enough comparison, the sorter will accept it and it updates the voter's record. If it's not close enough, then it kicks it out, and then we start through a manual verification process. And we have the first level of manual verification. We have people visually compare on a computer screen the signature on the envelope and the signature in the voter record. And the human eye can see things much better often than, they can see nuances better than the sorter. So we can accept a lot of ballots through that first manual verification because we can see that it matches or that it compares. If that first level of comparison, if people can't really make a call, maybe it's a fine judgment call, then it kicks it up to a higher level, and we do a little more research. We may have supplemental documents, signature documents on file for a voter that we can compare. And so there's a process of really manually checking the signature before we open that envelope and count that ballot. And as I said earlier, if a signature doesn't compare close enough, then we send the voter a letter and we let them know your signature didn't compare. Please follow the instructions in this letter and send the form back to us. So there's quite an extensive process, and that's why it takes so long after an election to process all those vote by mail ballots, because we need to be accurate. We want to be sure that we're really checking those signatures. And so encouraging people to get the ballot in earlier, 5 to 7 days early, gives us more time to get ballots processed, have more results on election night, and then have fewer ballots after the election to process. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, polling places. So part of the new law also has to do with early voting. And there's a Senate Bill 423 gave us the outline for polling places. So it talked about being able to maintain your regular number of polling places that you had in March and have them open on election day only, or to have fewer places open more days. So we opted to have fewer places open more days, and that is because in March we had 89 polling places and over 700 poll workers. And in this pandemic environment, that would have been virtually impossible to try to get that number of polling places and that number of poll workers. So because everybody is getting a vote by mail ballot, the best option for us was to have fewer polling places and have them open for more days. So our minimum required number is 17, but we have 29. We wanted to be able to have a few more open so that we will be able to better accommodate more voters throughout the county. So the safest way to vote and avoid lines will be by mail, but some people will need to go to a voting location. People who aren't registered by the deadline, people who spoiled their ballot or didn't get it and they need a ballot, or people who want to vote on an accessible ballot marking device. Another feature that will be offered this election will be remote accessible vote by mail. And what that is it's a way that we can email a link to voters. And we use this for our overseas and military voters. So this is not new for them, but it will be allowed for everybody this election. So we email a link and people can access their ballot and mark it online, but this is not online voting. I need to make that really clear. A person would still have to print their ballot and mail it back in a signed envelope. So, but that is an option for people if they don't want to go to the poll and they need access to the ballot in this other way. Something else we obviously are taking very seriously will be safety at the polling places. So there will be a PPE kit for the poll workers, and the kit will include masks and face shields, gloves, hand sanitizer, sanitizing wipes, disinfectant supplies, and we will also have masks available for voters. Masks and social distancing will be required at polling places for the safety of everybody. And we'll have gloves for voters if they feel like they would like to have gloves as well. We're preparing some safety guidelines for poll workers, and this is based on local and CDC guidelines, as well as guidelines from the Secretary of State. So next slide, please. So our last component with this election is education and outreach. And as you can see, I've listed just a partial list of our community partners, but League of Women Voters is one of them. We really appreciate the efforts that you are making and will make to help get the messages out for this election. We had, I had a couple of staff members who have been working for months on a messaging toolkit. They've had meetings with the community partners, and I think they have put together a really good program. So the messages and the toolkit went out, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, so that the partners can start to spread the word and just get people notified about the importance of registering, giving the message about voting by mail and polling place voting. And already we have one partner, Whistle Stop, who took our banner. We have the materials have all been translated into Spanish and Vietnamese. Those are our two state required languages for translating. And so Whistle Stop has hung the two banners, the Spanish and English, at their location. So it's very exciting to start to see the messages getting out there. So we appreciate all the partners, and League of Women Voters, we really appreciate not only your help this year, which is really important, but also in past years, how you've been a good partner. So my last slide, and then I'm open to take questions. So I just wanted to reiterate that the most important thing that we can all accept is that this election is going to be unlike any other election we've ever managed, and it's just not business as usual. So we do encourage people to use the vote by mail. That will be the safest way to vote during the pandemic and minimize lines at polls. But we are working hard to make this voting experience as smooth as possible and maintain the high standards that Marin County has always known. So there's a few resources, online resources for your convenience that you can get more information. So that is my overview of the election, and I'm open to questions.
You have a question, our first question from Susan Clark. Susan, could you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes, thank you, Doug. Sorry, I'm not used to doing this on my phone. I'm normally on my laptop. Lynda, thank you for everything. That was an extraordinary, thorough, and confidence-building presentation. I hope we can get the slides. My question is, I work with the State League and library literacy programs around the state, and some organizations here in Marin, with new voters, the 18 to 24-year-olds, and especially Latinx voters. And my understanding is that new voters have a higher likelihood of having their ballot, not pass through that signature sorter. I've also seen some viral videos among my grassroots partners casting doubt not upon the speed of the Postal Service, but that maybe Postal Service workers might see the R versus D on an envelope and pitch it. So there's just sort of this notion going around, can I trust mail? So I understand, overall, as you think about the overall electorate, you're pushing mail. But for those new voters, what have you, what advice did you and your committee come up with?
Well, I know the team developed a whole messaging kit that will address all of these questions. I'm just trying to look for my list of partners. I think we had some partners that are youth oriented to youth voters. So my apologies for not having that just right at the top of my head. I had a committee that did this, and so there may be some people actually on the League of Women Voters that have started with the messaging that might have more details. But I know the messaging is being really talking about registering, the vote by mail process, and the polling places, and the signatures. Okay, I'm sorry. You mentioned something about concern that if there's an R or a D on the envelope. Well, we're not putting, people's parties will not be listed on our envelopes. There will be no code like that. So for that, first of all,
Great.
That is not going to happen here.
Great, thank you.
Make that clear. And the Postal Service, we have not seen a slowdown with the mail. And our local post office, our regional post office in San Francisco, they're really good partners. And so we have a good relationship with them. We meet with them every year before an election. And if we noticed something, I could go right to the person who's my representative and say, hey, is there something going on? Or they may reach out and say, you might just want to be aware of such and such. But we have not noticed a problem with the post office. So because our vote by mail ballots are first class mail, I don't anticipate a problem here with just getting the mail in the stream and getting it back.
And what percent of ballots make it through the signature sorter?
Most of them do. Oh, through the signature sorter before they kick up to manual. That we don't keep that statistic. We
Mm.
just process as fast as we can. And
Got it.
so,
Okay.
you know, it's just when you're in the zone of the election, you're just getting the work done.
Great. Great. Okay. Thank you.
Lynda, can you turn up your microphone a little bit?
Oh, is that better? Is that
Yeah.
better?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. It tends to drop down there. Okay. There we go.
So you have another question from Stephanie McNally. So Stephanie, could you unmute and ask your question?
Yes. So Lynda, what are the concerns around poll workers, getting enough poll workers? Even though you have fewer polling places, you still have more days. So you have 4 days, you're gonna need poll workers. What are your concerns about recruiting poll workers? And is there something that we can do, obviously to promote, but any suggestions on how to encourage people to do something like that if they haven't done it in the past? And again, because it's a pandemic, that's on everyone's mind, right?
We are really fortunate because we have a big pool of poll workers to go to, poll workers who are trained. And so the response has really been positive, and we have more than we need. We are going to our trained poll workers to serve as the chiefs at the polling places and the deputies. They have the hardest job. So they'll be our first the first group that we're going to bring in, and we've had a good response. We have letters going out next week to confirm their appointments. Part of our recruiting this time did include that this will be 4 days. You know, you have to be comfortable with the safety situations at the polling places with wearing a mask and sanitizing and those safety concerns. But we've had a really good response, and we've had a lot of people just reach out showing an interest in being a poll worker. And so one of the positions we hire is a clerk, who they may be in the position to just to hand the ballot to the voter. And so we have a lot of backup if clerks drop out, or you know, we've got other people drop out. We do have a big pool, a lot of backup. So at this point, we're not concerned. We've had a real show of support. We're grateful for that because, yeah, it could have been really hard.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Thank you.
Now, Joan Brown, would you unmute and ask your question?
Lynda, thank you very much. I'm a person who always votes in person. I love going in the booth. I feel so patriotic and
Louder, Joan.
louder. Okay. Not sure how to make it louder.
Being closer like you are right now is working
Okay.
well.
If I sign up to absentee vote this election, am I required then to absentee vote forever?
No, and just because we're sending a ballot to all active registered voters, that does not change a voter's status. Voters who haven't signed up to be permanent vote by mail, it's not going to change your status if you're a polling place voter. It will just be this election one time only, because of the circumstances, that all voters will get the ballot in the mail. So your status won't change. Nobody has to sign up for this. It's going to be automatic. And you won't have to change your status after this is through. So
Are the materials you're sending out say that so people know that?
our messaging is around what's new because of this pandemic, and it states what I just went through in terms of for November 3, 2020 election, here's the circumstance. So it does pinpoint just this election for this particular circumstance. But you know, people, when we put information in the mail, a lot of times, for instance, when the ballot goes out, it's not unusual for people to call just to get clarification. You know, people are hearing a lot of stuff in the bigger news arena. And so we'll get phone calls all the time asking for clarification of locally what's going on.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have a question to ask? 'Cause I don't see any others in the chat box. It was such a thorough explanation. We don't have any questions.
I'm glad to hear that.
Well, you did a great job. So
Lynn-
back to our voter service team.
Wait, I have a quick
Lori
question.
has a question, Doug.
So I was just thinking, that was such a good question, Joan, and no one had asked that. Do you have, you must, an FAQ section on the voters website to answer, just to, in case people ask us, that we could send them to a link to address questions like that?
I know that part of the voter outreach toolkit includes a frequently asked question list.
Okay.
I'm not familiar with all of the detailed questions that are on there, but you know, and the great thing about the league and our contacts, I have to really thank Robin, is she'll let me know if, hey, you know, could you maybe clarify this or that, or put something on your website? So, you know, that's the great thing about having you as a partner is, you know, you'll give us feedback if you see something that maybe we need to beef up a little bit. So if people are looking and you don't quite see what you're looking for, you know, let us know so we can have the opportunity to put out more clarification. We did put together a November 2020 sort of a web page that has different tabs on it, trying to really pinpoint things specific to November. And one of the tabs is what's new. So, you know, we've tried to make it easy for people to find information once they click on the main link on our website in the red box that takes them to the November website. Then there's these tabs people can click on. So we're hoping that will be helpful and a quick way for people to find information.
Thank you.
Yeah, Lynda, I want to just add there that I think with input from me and other people, wanted to get away from the front page that has a lot of information when you first go to elections just for this upcoming election. And I have to say it is robust. It may not be as you know, flashy as a lot of websites, but there's a lot of good information there and the tabs are there. Spend a little time. Bookmark it, go back. Marinvotes.org is their shortcut. It goes to their homepage and then click on for the election. All these things you're asking are there. And then they are good about answering if they're not. And Lynda, two things that I think sort of came up or people may not have asked that people are asking a lot is about using the drop boxes. If they're nervous about the US mail, there's no problem using the maybe explain about the drop boxes. And then after that, that word active registered voters, I know is a catch for a lot of people.
So drop boxes, so did you have something specific you wanted me to say about them, Robin?
Just describe what they are, sort of where they'll be. I think it's something that people don't even realize that you had them at the Civic Center. I know that, and a few people, but not, a lot of people didn't really know that. So I think just everything about drop boxes. Yeah.
So these drop boxes are going to be big. We're going to have, right now we have 12 external drop boxes that are going to be available 24 hours a day. And these are big. These are like regular post office mailboxes. So they're big. They're silver, so they look different. So they won't be confused with a regular mailbox. But they're very sturdy. They're very secure. And they will be either bolted into the ground and the bolts are on the inside, or they will be attached to a solid sort of a structure like a post or something at places that we couldn't bolt them into the sidewalk. So they will be around the county. They're very secure. We will have a regular pickup schedule. We're still developing what that's going to be. And so I think people will feel confident with these boxes. And what was your other? Well, I'm sorry, let me just back up. They'll be identified too. It'll be clear that it's a ballot drop-off box. And so what was the other part of it?
It was that word active, that all the ballots will be sent to active registered voters.
Right. So that is there was some misconception early on that every registered voter, every voter in our database would get a ballot, whether they were inactive or canceled or, you know, and that's not how it works. And so when the legislation was passed, it reiterated that the law is to send ballot materials to active registered voters. If people are in an inactive status, meaning they haven't voted in a long time, then they won't automatically get a ballot. And obviously, if people are in a canceled status, they won't automatically get a ballot. So it's just the people who are active. Now, if inactive voters show up, they can vote provisionally, and then we can activate their record, and we can process things on our end after the election. But that's why we're stressing that it's active registered voters. So there's not this concern about just everybody getting a ballot.
There's now a question from Greg Brockbank. Greg, would you unmute and ask?
Yes. Hi. Thanks.
Hi, Greg.
Terrific. That was good. It's good to hear all that. We all need all of that often and repeatedly. I know that we were moving on parallel tracks to do two changes. One is new voting machines, which we planned on doing this year, and we did, and gets very little notice because maybe it's not that important. But the other was moving to voting centers, which we decided to do, I thought, unless I'm remembering incorrectly, in 2 years, starting in 2022. So we didn't do it at the same time as the new voting machines change. But this new legislation requiring mailing ballots to every registered voters and keeping polling places, I don't want to call them polling places, that people will think of the old system with 100 polling places, but I don't want to call them voting centers because they're not exactly the new voting centers yet. So what do we call these new places to vote for 3 days prior to Election Day and on Election Day?
Well, the official term is consolidated polling places. And what it means is there's just more voters consolidated into a precinct. And so they are polling places because we're still going to assign people to a polling place. Because you're absolutely right, Greg. We are not ready to make that jump into this full vote center model. And so we needed to have a supply of paper ballots at each site. And so we needed to assign people to a specific place so that we could have their inventory of ballots at that site. So the places will be run the same way we're running our polling places now. There will just be fewer of them and open the 3 extra days. So it's kind of a little bit of a hybrid model. Under the vote center, a certain number of those have to be open 11 days. So it's kind of in between our usual polling places and vote centers. So it's actually going to be, once we're through this and it's all successful and we can think back and look back, this will be a very interesting learning of how the vote center model will look. And it maybe is a nice step towards that. So we will have a little bit experience getting locations and workers and setting them up. Good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Dee Dee and Robin, I think that's the end of our questions.
So Lynda, this is related to another question I've gotten a lot is how will I know where my new polling place is going to be? And I know the answer, but I'm going to let you answer that.
It will be printed on the back of the voter information guide like it always is. And so we tried to keep things as much the same as possible. So there's enough change that we didn't want to just do massive amount of change and have voters feel very confused. So it'll be printed in the same place on the back cover. There again, people, they typically call us. If they're not sure, they'll typically call us. And they'll just ask, and then we can look it up and find it. And we do post a list of all the polling places on our website, which is something that is standard. We do that for every election. But people just need to look at the back cover of their voter guide. Great.
Yeah, and I'll say again that the marinvotes.org is really have added a lot to it. And I know that I did have a lot of questions, and I mentioned to Megan Stone, who worked on the voter outreach, that I really felt it was super important to get that there, and they've done a great job. So really check that out, themarinvotes.org. So if there are no more questions.
There's one more question from Nancy Bell. Nancy, unmute yourself.
Thank you. So Lynda, just to clarify, people will be assigned polling places, but they can use any drop box in the county. Is that correct?
That is correct. So just like in every past election, people can also, if they want to or need to, they can drop their ballot at any polling place like they do now. They just can't vote at any polling place. They need to go, if they need to vote in person, they need to go to their assigned location. But yes, they can drop that ballot at any drop box or any polling place. I did want to just say one more thing to encourage people who do need to vote at a location. We're hoping that people will take advantage of these 3 extra days and not wait until election day, because we really want to avoid long lines. We don't want people to have to wait a long amount of time. I mean, we hear these sort of horror stories in other states, and we don't want that to happen here. So, people need to take advantage of those early days. And also, as is typical in every election, our department will be open October 5th for people who maybe need to come in. Maybe they're going to be leaving town and they can't wait for their ballot to be sent to them. So people can also come here starting October 5th. But there again, if there's going to be some safety requirements with mask wearing, social distancing, limited number of people in the office at one time. So it's just good to keep this current environment in mind around voting and what your voting plan is.
Joan Brown has another question. Joan, you want to go ahead?
Since this is such a massive drive to have everybody vote by mail, are you having increased staff so that we're going to get results in a timely way?
We have hired more people. We had a good crew in March, and it was interesting because we were really with our new counting system, which is really fast. We were about a week ahead of where we normally would have been, and we had a big group and we were moving along, and then COVID hit, and half our staff, because of the stay at home, they needed to leave, and so we certified the same time we normally would, but we are staffing up again. The tricky part, though, is managing a big staff under these COVID situations, because we are being very vigilant. I mean, extremely vigilant in this office about safety, because none of us can afford to get sick in any way. So we're having to make sure, people are not sitting too close or working too close or sharing workspace and all those things. So it makes it hard to maybe staff up more than we have now. But we look at staffing. We talk about, okay, if we need, depending on when we start to get a lot of vote by mail ballots in, should we try to bring in more people and have them work in a different place? So we are looking at staffing, but we feel confident with the number that we've hired. And many of them are people who worked for us in March. So they're already trained, they're ready to go. We think that we can process things quickly. And so thank you for asking.
Lynda, maybe I can take advantage while you're here is to talk a little bit about the vote count. I know that's the new laws added some flexibility for you, and I know that there is start talk. I do our social media. There's a lot of chatter all about how the vote count is going to take longer and how to explain that to people so that they're not worried, because they're already hearing things that make it sound like that's because of bad reasons. So maybe you could explain about the vote count in a little bit of detail. Thanks.
Sure. So I don't anticipate, well, because we're already high vote by mail, we're used to dealing and handling a lot of vote by mail. So that's a good thing. You know, we're ready for it. And so it's typical that getting all the ballots processed, it takes 2.5, maybe 3 weeks. And sometimes we're right up to the 30-day deadline. We like to certify before the 30 days, but sometimes we're just right up a day or two to that deadline. So that's not abnormal. And so the reason it takes time on these results is the signature checking process. And so that's why I probably keep drumming this message out there, but if people can get those ballots in earlier, that's going to help. I mean, it's almost like we need our voters to be our partners this year. We really need you to be our partners and get the ballot back as soon as you can. Of course, we want voters to take the time they need, but the more we can get processed in advance, the less we'll have after. But that's why it takes so long, is that signature verification process. If we have a lot of provisional ballots and people who aren't registered by the deadline, the conditional voter registration ballots, those two, the provisional and the conditional voter registration, are very time intensive. They require a lot more research than the vote by mail. So there again, that's why our messaging talks about get registered by the deadline so that you automatically get your ballot materials. So it's all tied into how soon we can get the election certified, get the results done and certified. But as in past big elections, we are planning as needed to work weekends and, you know, to get the job done, because we do know that voters want to know, and there's going to be some level of anxiousness about results, but we will work through the weekend if needed to get this done.
And you have added time prior to election day to count, as well as you'll be having some come later. But I know that's been in the news a lot, that some states actually their registrars are not allowed to start counting. I don't know why that is before, but maybe you could explain about that. Oh,
sure. So under the current law, we are allowed to start taking ballots out of envelopes 10 business days before election. The new law specific to this election will allow us to start to process ballots earlier than that. So it will depend on the volume, because it's not worth our time to just handle a few ballots and run them through the sorter. It's much more efficient for our time to wait till we have a fairly good volume and then run them through the sorter and start that whole process. So the new law says as early as October 6th, we can start doing that whole process. So we'll have to gauge it by volume, but as soon as we can get a volume to make it worth the time efficiency, then we will get going on that. So we've always been able to run them through the sorter as soon as we get them, but now we'll be able to do the whole start to finish process as we do. We won't have to run them through the sorter and then set them aside to open later and take the ballots out. So that is going to be helpful too, I think.
Stephanie McNally, you have a question. Do you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, so this is a follow-up question about when ballots will be mailed and when the voter registration deadline is. So if somebody has registered to vote after you've mailed the initial round of ballots, will those individuals also receive a ballot in the mail? So if someone registers, you know, close to the 19th or just before, will they still receive a ballot in the mail?
Yes. Anybody who's registered on the 19th, on the deadline, we process those, and so that they will be in the database when we send it off to our ballot printer vendor to put those packets together. So it's people who miss that cutoff that then they will have to come into the office because they'll have to register and then vote at the same time.
Right.
Because
So
those, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to, so I just want to be able to reassure people that if they register after October 5th, which is when you guys are actually sending out the ballots, that, they should be, you said they will receive them 5 to 7 days after that, that if they register after that initial mailing, they'll still get a ballot in the mail.
Yeah, if they register by the deadline. Yeah, it'll be automatic.
Got it. So as registrations come in, you'll be sending out, sounds like you'll be sending out ballots as registrations come in October. Until the 19th. Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, one last question, Lynda, that I have gotten from a few people. Very interested in helping people, and they want to be able to take people's voted vote by mail ballots completed, and they want to be able to turn them in for them. And I know there's a little bit of a nuance around doing that, so I just wondered if it'd be best for you to explain it, for me to read the rules and try to interpret it.
Well, there is on the flap of the return envelope, there's a place where a voter can indicate that they are designating a person. They list the name, and the voter signs it, that this person, I'm allowing this person to turn my ballot in for me. What I encourage voters to do who need that is that they have somebody they know and somebody they trust do that for them. So, it is tricky if somebody you don't know shows up and says, hey, I'm here to take your ballot and turn it in. I'm just saying that I think voters need to be careful, and they need to, I think it's most prudent if they know the person and they trust that person, and before they turn their ballot over to somebody.
Lori Nardone, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, just a quick one. I was just curious with the being able to start counting the ballots right as soon as it makes sense for you to do that. You could do that early. Is that a state by state mandate? So some states could say, no, you absolutely can't start until November 3rd. And then others, is it state by state, or is that a federal?
Well, states determine their own election laws. So I would imagine states have various laws around that. And I've heard the various things from different states, little bits and pieces. Some states they have to wait. Some states I think still have to get ballots back by election day. So it is a state by state.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, if there are no more questions, I find it hard to believe with our crew, but we actually have we have done a lot of questions. But I was in the office yesterday to pick up some materials, and I left something for you.
Oh, yes.
You have that with you?
I do.
A little thank you for Lynda taking the time to come and speak to us, and especially on our weekend, and we know she's so busy. So we thought we'd try to keep a little bit of a tradition of giving the gift to the speaker and actually have her open it in front of us. And since we're great on time, it's plenty of time.
Thank you for that, first of all. This was really sweet, and I didn't peek, so I followed your instructions. Oh, that's nice. Oh my gosh. Oh, I just got chills down my back. Thank you so much. This is so great. Oh, thank you. What a nice gift. So boy, I'll treasure this. Thank you so much.
And just so you know, it's handmade from someone in England. I just happen to know very much about that, since I did actually end up ordering one for myself earlier this year, and I absolutely loved it. And so when we talked about a gift for you, I said, oh my gosh, I have to order one. It came from England. She got it here in a week. I said, I really want to give it to her. And she does it in the British green, white, and purple, and then also the American gold, white, and purple. So I made sure we got the American one for you, so you can wear that proudly. And we're just so proud of having you. and a woman running our elections department this year. How amazing. And we're just so glad you came in and talked to us. But I wanted to give you one last chance to promote an event that's coming up on September 22nd that you're going to be involved in before you leave.
Oh, right. Yes. Thank you. So on September 22nd is National Voter Registration Day. And so I will be having a proclamation on the board agenda. I need to give a shout out, want to give a shout out to Vita Flores. I don't know if she's on the call today, but she's been a long time outreach consultant for this department. She does a great job. And she really organizes these registration outreach events for National Disability Registration and National Voter Registration Day. So she gets the credit for organizing all that. So we've put this proclamation on the board agenda. And so we'll talk about that. And then the board, I will be giving the board an update about November, probably similar to, not as extensive with the PowerPoint, but you know, the high level points about what will be different for November. That's, I think, the meeting, I believe, starts at 9. And if any of you have attended, you know it's Zoom, so you probably know how to log into that. So,
yeah, we have that login on our website under local government. You can go in there, and it is a little involved, I have to say. So if you're going to do it, then to go in ahead of time and kind of figure that out. But I'll be watching because I always love hearing you speak, and I am excited for the proclamation. And I know that Vita is going to be getting out some information about things that are going on for that day. So, Anne, did you want to say anything before Lynda signs off?
I do. I want to say thank you, Lynda, for being with us today. But more than that, thank you for all you do. We are so lucky to live here in Marin County and have an elections department that is so dedicated to making sure that we can vote and our vote counts, and the wonderful outreach that you're doing to make sure everybody knows what's happening. It's just terrific, and I can't thank you enough. I think we should all unmute and give Lynda a round of applause.
thank you. Thank you all. The support really means a lot to us, because I have to say it is tough planning this election under these circumstances. So your support is so meaningful. Thank you very much, and for the opportunity today. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Lynda.
Thank you.
Happy